Have you heard of the new condo laws that could affect anyone buying or selling real estate in South Florida? Well, if you haven't, don't risk costly mistakes. You're going to want to stay tuned and watch this video from start to finish, because we're going to go over what these changes are, what it means for the market, and how you could potentially save yourself thousands of dollars. By the way, I'm Juan Yarusi with Compass, your South Florida realtor. And over the years, I've helped people just like you navigate the South Florida market successfully and achieve their real estate goals. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive in, because this is a very sensitive subject that we need to go in depth and uncover. In 2021, there was a terrible tragedy that took place in the town of Surfside in the greater Miami area. The incident that took place is that a 12-story building, the Champlain Towers, collapsed. It was a devastating tragedy that everybody wishes could have been avoided. Not too long after, the Senate decided to pass a new bill that went in detail as to specify what condos needed to do in order to avoid ever having to go through this again. The SB 4D Building Safety Bill requires that all buildings that are 3 stories and taller and that are 30 years or older, or 25 years or older if they are 3 miles from the coastline, must be inspected by an architect or an engineer to ensure the building's structural safety. And after this initial inspection, they need to do this every 10 years thereafter. These are referred to as Milestone Inspections, and the bill outlines that if any building got their certificate of occupancy prior to July 1st, 1992, they needed to get this done by December 31st of 2024. The way the inspections are carried out is in 2 phases. Phase 1 must be conducted within 180 days after the association receives notification from the local government. And phase 1 is a visual inspection that must be carried out by either an architect or an engineer that will vet the building's structural safety. If the building passes phase 1, then there's no need to pry any deeper. However, if during phase 1 they uncover substantial structural deterioration, then phase 2 must commence. And phase 2 is a much more intrusive analysis of the building structure, just to make sure that they can certify what the issues are and they can address it accordingly to prevent any possible issues in the future. After a phase 2 report is given, buildings have up to 365 days to commence on working on those repairs. The bill also provides for the unit owners to have access to these reports. So for both sellers out there, you have access through the association of what's going on with these reports. So that covers the milestone inspection. What else? Well, there's also a structural integrity reserve study that must be done, and it applies to buildings that are 3 stories or taller. Needed to get this done before December 31st of 2024. The bill defines structural integrity reserve study as a study of the reserve fund required for future major repairs and replacements of common elements based on a visual inspection of the common elements. It requires a study to include a visual inspection, state the estimated remaining useful life, and the estimated replacement cost of the roof, load-bearing walls, or other primary structure members, floor, foundation, fireproofing and fire protection systems, plumbing, and any item with a deferred maintenance or replacement cost that exceeds $10,000. The visual inspection must be performed by a person licensed as an engineer or an architect. And again, now sellers are obligated to inform buyers of what is happening, and buyers have the right to receive all of this documentation whenever negotiating the purchase of a new property. So if you're looking to purchase, or even if you're thinking of selling, make sure that you request this document and review them. Not only the structural integrity reserve study, but also request the financials, the budget, the meeting minutes of the building, which are the notes that are taken during a board meeting so that you have an understanding of what has been discussed in previous months and what they're planning for upcoming months and the near future. So how has this impacted buyers or the market in general? Well, over the past couple of years, South Florida has seen an increase in HOA dues, or your common fee charges, and that is mostly attributed to the rise in insurance costs that we have seen as a nation. But in South Florida, it's been more prevalent because our insurance costs have always been significantly high. So there was already issues with the rising cost of HOAs. And with this new law, it requires buildings to comply and fund their reserves. And many of these folks were on fixed income, might be retirees that were not planning on having all of this jump out at once. And while there are buildings that aren't necessarily being affected as heavily because they've kept up with things, they've monitored, maintained the buildings well, they've had or incurred assessments in the past and are now up to date with everything that they need. There are some buildings that are getting hit with pretty big assessments and a lot of folks that are not able to foot the bill. So then you have a situation where a homeowner cannot pay the assessments and they decide to try to sell their unit, and now a buyer might be weary of what's happening with the building or might negotiate for the seller to pay for that assessment in full, which is really not an unusual request, but then it puts strain on the seller. And really those buildings that are experiencing the most turmoil right now are those that had to meet that deadline of December 31st of 2024. But all of these other ones had this come out of nowhere. And Governor Ron DeSantis is aware of the burden that this is putting on homeowners, and he has called a special session later in January. And there's a large number of buildings that were constructed between the 2000 and 2010 era, which will be the next in line to get all of these things done. Again, they have a little bit more time to get prepared and get their ducks in a row, but this is eminent for everybody. And this bill was passed in 2022. However, to be honest, since 21, since the building collapsed, when we worked with folks from either New York or California or Chicago that were moving down here, they didn't want anything to deal with older buildings. They wanted newer condos, not only because of the architecture, the amenities, and everything that it offered, but in a big part because no one knew what would come of this. And after the bill was passed, people shifted their focus even more so to newer buildings, or at least buildings that were very well run and very well maintained that had none of these issues to worry about. So as a buyer, what does this mean for you? Well, now that you're aware that this is an issue, it behooves you to make sure that you review all of the inspection report, the reserve study, the financials of the building, that you request the meeting minutes, that you vet the building thoroughly. And people should always do this, but now is a time where you want to be extra careful about this. And if after reviewing everything you feel comfortable, then that's great. But if you discover things that make you uneasy during that process, act accordingly. See, now there's a lot more inventory that has come onto the market, in big part because of this. So buyers have more options, and it allows you to negotiate perhaps a much better deal than you could have certainly a few years ago. And if you're a homeowner and you're thinking of selling, or it's making you want to sell because you're not sure what's happening, reach out to your condo association management, ask them what's happening, ask them to send you over the reports. They are going to send you the budget and the financials, and always make sure to review them and make sure that they are setting aside those funds for the reserve. And the same thing applies. If the building seems to be in good condition, great. But if after speaking with them, you determine that there's too much uncertainty, or you just don't feel comfortable with it anymore, well, then you can take the necessary steps and decide to sell the property if that's what you're looking to do. In the end, I'm not a legal professional, and this is just for informational purposes anyway. I'm not giving any sort of legal advice or financial advice on here. Instead, I just want to break down exactly what's happening so you can take the necessary steps for what's best for you. In the end, these changes are important for both buyers and sellers to understand. Staying informed is key, and I will continue to update you as this moves along. However, if you have any questions or need help navigating these changes, reach out to me directly. My information is in the description below. If you'd like to book a complimentary consultation, in the description I will put a link so you can book a time to speak with me directly so we can analyze what it is that you're looking to do and how we may help ensure your real estate success here in South Florida. If you found any value at all in this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give me a like. It really helps boost the algorithm and put me in front of more people. This is a newer channel. I'm trying to grow it and bring as much information and as much value to you as possible. If you want to stay up to date on these changes, go ahead and subscribe. I also put out different types of content like market updates, neighborhood tours, property tours, and new development projects. But until the next time, I'm Juan Yarusi, your South Florida realtor. Thank you so much for watching. Stay savvy, stay informed, and stay ready. And I'll see you on the next one.